In the 1930s, in the lively city of Tianjin, there lived a wealthy textile merchant named Charles
I was
Zhou.
hoping for company.
He was successful,
You see,
respected,
I've got
and very rich.
stories, dark ones,
But he had no
chilling
sons,
ones,
only two
the
daughters.
kind that keep you up at
The elder
night.
was Helen,
Mythical
22 years
creatures,
old.
curses,
The younger
horrors
May
you
was
can't
20.
escape.
His first wife
Shall
had
we
passed
begin?
away early,
Don't worry,
and though he
I
later
won't
took a
bite
concubine, she never
much.
had children. Both Helen and May were bright, graceful young women, educated, elegant, and modern. They didn't bind their feet like women of older generations, and they carried themselves with confidence and sophistication. That same year, Charles's health began to fail fast. It became clear that his time was running out, so he arranged his estate carefully. The family's large Western-style villa would be shared by both daughters, who would continue living there together. But the textile business and nearly all the wealth was handed entirely to Helen. The concubine was given a comfortable place to live and enough money to live out her days in peace. As for May, she was granted only a generous monthly allowance. It was more than enough to live well, but not a penny more. No one knew for sure why Charles had divided things this way, but people speculated. Helen had studied business in Japan and was calm, rational, and reliable. Everything her impulsive younger sister was not. After Charles passed away, the two sisters kept living in the villa. It was a grand 4-story home with a huge courtyard, and they each had their own floor, so there was plenty of space and privacy. Helen took full control of the family business. She traveled often for work, sometimes to cotton-producing regions, and rarely had time for much else. She had a boyfriend, but they barely saw each other anymore. Meanwhile, May was fully enjoying the life of a wealthy young woman. She visited upscale restaurants and dance halls where men often tried to strike up conversations with her. One day, a stranger approached her, and he stood out right away. He was tall, maybe 6 feet 1 inch, strikingly handsome, and had impeccable manners. He introduced himself as Andrew Chen. They only spoke for a few minutes, but that was all it took. May was smitten. Over the following weeks, their relationship quickly grew warmer. They weren't officially a couple yet, but they were close, very close. And then one day, while visiting the villa, Andrew met Helen. It started with just a polite hello, but the conversation kept going. Helen found herself drawn to his easy charm, his gentle eyes, and his thoughtful, intelligent answers. The more she spoke with him, the more impressed she became. Andrew wasn't just attractive, he was smart, mature, and knew how to navigate the world. Compared to May, he was far more composed and experienced. Helen fell for him hard. She began skipping work just to spend time with him. She even broke up with her boyfriend. And she made the first move. She started pursuing Andrew directly. When she found out he came from a poor rural village and had parents and younger siblings depending on him, she didn't hesitate. She promised him everything. She'd take care of his whole family, pay for his siblings' education, make sure they all had a future. All he had to do was be with her. 2 months later, Helen and Andrew announced their engagement. May was crushed. She had truly fallen for Andrew, and now her sister had taken him, just like their father had taken everything and handed it to Helen, first the inheritance, now the man she loved. And there was nothing she could do. Helen and Andrew's wedding was a grand affair. The most prominent families in Tianjin attended. Of course, some of them looked down on Andrew for his humble background, but they smiled to his face. A few business rivals were even secretly hoping for trouble in the Zhou family, ready to enjoy the drama. After the wedding, Andrew and Helen moved into the upper floors of the villa, while May continued to live downstairs. But Helen wasn't stupid. She knew her sister had feelings for her new husband, and she didn't want to take any chances. She insisted Andrew go everywhere with her. No time alone with May, no private conversations, nothing. Still, Andrew found ways to send May signals, just looks, really. But they said everything. His eyes would find hers across the room, full of sadness and longing. To anyone else it might mean nothing, but to May they were proof that he still loved her. Then one day, on the staircase, they passed each other. As they brushed shoulders, Andrew reached out and gently squeezed her hand. Just a second. But it shook May to her core. That one moment told her everything. He still cared. And so she made up her mind. Helen had to go. It was the only way. Once Helen was gone, she and Andrew could finally be together. And with Helen out of the picture, the family fortune would be up for grabs. But how? A staged car accident. Too risky. Hiring someone? She didn't have the money or the nerve. Too many people would find out. Then it hit her. She remembered something. Years ago, she'd briefly worked at her father's friend's printing factory. They used all kinds of chemicals there. One in particular stood out, a toxic compound called K1. She remembered an incident when a bit of it spilled on a desk, got into a worker's cup, and caused him to collapse. The doctors had said it was dangerous even in small amounts and fatal with long-term exposure. It was perfect. May returned to the factory and spoke with her father's old friend. She said she was bored at home and wanted to help out again. She was well educated and had even studied English. The manager agreed to take her back 3 days a week, nothing too serious. Before long, she had access to the chemicals. Now came the hardest part, how to deliver the poison. Then she remembered something very few people knew. Helen had asthma, and her lips often got dry. She always carried a little tin of lip balm, the kind you dab on with your finger. She used it every day, without fail. One evening, Helen came home and left her handbag upstairs. While she and Andrew were having dinner downstairs, May slipped into her sister's room. She took a syringe and carefully injected a small amount of K1 into the tin of balm. Then, just to be sure, she found a new, unopened tin in Helen's vanity and poisoned that one too. Helen used that balm every day. No one would ever suspect. May waited for the perfect moment. One evening, Helen came home from work, dropped her handbag in her room, and went downstairs to have dinner with Andrew. May seized the chance. While they were distracted, she quietly crept upstairs, slipped into Helen's bedroom, and pulled the tin of lip balm from her sister's purse. Using a syringe, she injected a tiny dose of the K1 poison into the balm, just enough to weaken her over time without raising suspicion. Then she found the new tin on the vanity and did the same. 2 poisoned balms, no witnesses, no mess. Everyone knew Helen used the balm daily. It was just part of her routine. No one would think twice about it. A few days later, Helen began to cough more than usual. Occasionally she wheezed. It wasn't alarming at first. She had asthma after all, and the doctor said it was probably a seasonal cold or a bit of fatigue. He prescribed her some medicine and told her to rest. But Helen didn't get better. She got worse. Soon, she could barely walk up the stairs without stopping to catch her breath. Her complexion grew pale, her energy drained. It had been over a month since May started the poisoning, and the symptoms were unmistakable. Then one afternoon, when Andrew was out picking up herbal medicine for Helen, it finally happened. The house was quiet. Just the 2 sisters inside. May was in the dining room, downstairs, when she heard a loud crash, glass shattering, and then Helen's voice, faint and panicked, calling for help. She rushed upstairs. Helen was collapsed on the floor near the bedroom door. A vase had been knocked over. Her breathing was shallow. She was unconscious but still alive, barely. May's heart pounded, not out of panic for her sister's life, but because this was it, the moment she had played out in her mind over and over, her chance to finish it cleanly. She searched the room quickly. The poisoned lip balm on the vanity was still there. She grabbed it and stuffed it into her pocket. But the tin from Helen's purse, the one she'd been using, was nowhere to be found. Maybe she'd finished it. Maybe she'd thrown it away. May knelt beside her sister. Helen was cold to the touch. A few minutes later, her breathing stopped completely. Now came the performance. May ran to the window, threw it open, and screamed, "Help! Somebody help! My sister's collapsed." The staff came rushing, maids from the kitchen, the gardener from outside, even a neighbor who heard the commotion. Together they lifted Helen and rushed her to the hospital. Andrew arrived soon after, having heard the news from a neighbor. He raced to the hospital, but it was too late. Helen had died. The cause? A severe asthma attack and heart failure. The doctor said it was sudden, but not entirely surprising. But then something unexpected happened. The police showed up. A detective named Luke Bin arrived with 2 officers. He said someone had reported the death and requested an investigation. He asked the family's permission for an autopsy. May and Andrew were devastated, crying hysterically, especially Andrew. His grief looked heartbreakingly real. In fact, May thought to herself, "He's better at this than I am." She didn't dare object to the autopsy. That might raise suspicion. A few days later, Detective Bin returned. The report was natural causes, they said, death from pre-existing conditions. Helen could be laid to rest. May felt a wave of relief crash over her. The plan had worked. No one suspected a thing. The funeral was grand and solemn. They buried Helen with honor. Andrew gave a moving speech. May kept up the act, mourning her sister while secretly glowing inside. That evening, after returning to the villa, May couldn't hold it in any longer. She climbed the stairs and knocked on Andrew's door. He opened it, and there he was, standing in his bedroom, holding a tin of lip balm and applying it to his lips. The exact same brand Helen used. May froze. Her heart dropped. "Andrew," she said, panicked, "don't use that. You can't use that." Andrew, still dazed from the loss of his wife, looked at her weakly and asked, "Why not?" "My lips have been so dry lately. I figured this might help." He kept applying it again and again. "No!" May rushed forward to grab it, but Andrew stepped back, confused. "What's going on, May? Why are you so upset?" And at that moment, May made a choice. "He loves me," she told herself. "He deserves to know the truth." She closed the door behind her, turned to him, and confessed everything. The jealousy, the poison, the balm, her love for him, her dreams of being together. And just as she finished speaking, a door creaked open inside the room. It was the bathroom. Out stepped Detective Luke Bin. May's face turned white. She screamed, "Why are you here?" Luke raised a hand, calm and cool. At his signal, 2 officers entered from the hallway and restrained May. It was over. During her interrogation, everything unraveled. It turned out Andrew had reported Helen's suspicious death to the police the day it happened. Workers at the printing factory had seen May snooping around the chemical storage. The police had investigated quietly and discovered that Helen had died clutching the used tin of lip balm in her hand. May had been too panicked to notice. And Andrew? He had never loved May. Her obsession was completely one-sided. Losing Helen had broken him, and now May's confession had destroyed whatever illusions he had left. May was found guilty of murdering her sister. A few weeks later, she was executed.